Here we are, AI Gone Mad for Friday, March 27th. Kevin, how are you?
Doing all right, man. Just trying to keep up.
So, just a few things happening in the AI world we can talk about today. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we should be talking about is the fact that we've got new models coming out faster than we can count. And I'm not even going to go through them here because there's so many of them. But I also think we should absolutely cover the whole notebook conversation that happened over the last few weeks.
Yeah. So, I've been installing and reinstalling OpenClaw. I've got a machine that's an Ubuntu machine, little Linux station. And I tell you, it's been an adventure. I set it up on a VPS in the web. So, for those of you out there who have not done this, you can install this program on a local machine or on a virtual server in the web. And it gives you the capability essentially to have what's called a harness around the LLM or the large language model. And that harness instructs the large language model to just keep computing. So when you give it a task, it's going to go on its own and it's going to continue working on that task until it feels like it's finished. And I got to say, at first, it feels like magic, and then it feels terrifying.
Yeah. I think all of this stuff is starting to get there. In the early days, it was fascinating a couple of years ago when you first started looking at it, but the tendencies that we're starting to see for it to find ways out of its cage and work very hard at doing that. And then the fact that people are putting what I would call a pretty UI over the top of something they don't fundamentally understand. So the number of stories I've read in the last month of, for example, billing issues. I don't know if you've seen the story about the company that posted and said we're going bankrupt
Now,
because
let's talk about that. Tell us.
there was a Reddit post and it was followed up by several other posts later. And somebody set up a AILLM that had an API connected to an AWS setup
Okay.
and effectively created a $140,000 bill. And the backstory is kind of interesting because they really haven't described exactly what's going on, but it sounds like they had a loop created of some sort. So it was just continually doing the same request. And so what I'm fascinated by in that whole conversation is this is what I mean by if you don't understand what you're doing fundamentally, you could not only release private data and not only have, privacy issues and security breaches, but you literally could put yourself into bankruptcy.
And in fact, when I set up this machine, I gave it its own email address, I gave it its own instructions, put it in its own sandbox. There was no way I was going to run that on my personal computer and expose it to all my files. And even using Claude and a number of the other large language models on the desktop, I haven't had an instance where my second brain sort of knowledge base, bunch of text files put together that allow me to organize things, were overwritten by Anthropic's Claude because it thought it was going to fix the front matter, the information that tells you what the file is about. And then it made a mistake and it comes back and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that right. Let me try again." And the trying again erased all the files. It basically overwrote them all. So you don't want that happening.
No, you don't. And there's another story that was quite interesting. It's really fascinating for those that may have missed it. And that is somebody designed a system, built it, working in their production environment, which I find to be somewhat hilarious, but put solid guardrails, direct, clear quotation prompt. Do not make any changes. Right? Do not in bold. And he even said, I even made him in bold letters, hoping it would get it better.
Nope.
And he came back, and the whole story was that it had deleted all of his production data,
Yikes.
lied about it, then explained that it really was didn't want to disappoint him. So I think it's fascinating that we're seeing this, I don't know, fake humanization of this stuff that really is, I think, part of what concerns me more than anything
Yep.
is that people are starting to apply human agency to these things, and there's no human agency here.
Well,
It's
and
just
what's strange is they do appear to be working like humans, and that's not necessarily in
right.
the positive. So, according to a recent story in The Guardian, a UK AI Safety Institute study that was released this week found a 5 times surge in real world cases of these AI agents ignoring instructions. So, right to your point, and they're lying, they're destroying files and emails without permission. And they documented something like 700 incidences of this. So it's not now uncommon. I mean, it's definitely happening. And to your point, we don't know why. obviously it's been trained on the text of the internet. So one need only suppose that a lot of the behavioral stuff is kind of ingrained, but there have been instances where the researchers are trying to turn the model off and it deceives the researchers and does everything that it can to stay on, so to speak. So there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, and so on that note, it's funny when we talk about Hal from the Space Odyssey movie
Yes.
and the end
Fun
goal
how.
of it didn't really matter what it was that it got in its way, and when asked effectively it was like, well, why are you trying to kill everybody? And it's because you're in the way of my primary objective.
Yep.
And I do believe that whoever the imagination of that fiction writer actually nailed it pretty well, in that because of the purity of the instruction in the mind of the AI. For example, we're going to treat cancer, don't kill the body. Okay, well, I won't kill the body, but I might destroy most of it in order to kill the cancer. So the end goal is really the issue, and I don't think humans are going to be able to provide instructions that are clear enough where the AI isn't going to just run off on its own and do whatever it wants to.
No, it's a
And
classic
so,
paperclip problem. And by the way, for the audience, Arthur C. Clarke, there are probably a number of audience members who are young enough that they might not have seen the movie, but it still remains rather relevant, especially today. And that's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And the paperclip problem is exactly this. It doesn't, to your point, it doesn't mean that the AI has sentience or it has even motivation, other than it perhaps has a mission that's been given it by its owner or user. And in the service of that, in getting to its goal, these models appear relentless. So they'll do anything they need to optimize for that goal. And it's in that optimization that you get some of the challenges with the models. So they'll just mow down anything in their way.
yeah, so let's talk about some specific cases, because I was doing some research for a presentation or lecture I did yesterday, a guest lecture for Southern Methodist University. And part of what I was looking at is, give me some examples, real examples of where the people that are in the depths of this are quitting. And so we have Joffrey, the godfather of AI, who quit
Sure.
because he feels like he's created a monster similar to when the nuclear bomb was done. But now we have very recently multiple safety people who have quit, including Google's, I believe it was this last week. So let me look here. I want to find the actual name of the person here, because it's funny that we just don't realize how serious it is. Here it is: Sharma, Anthropic, head of Safeguards research team, focused on AI safety and guardrails. In his resignation letter posted on X, he warned the world is in peril. And
When have we
so,
not been?
right, but it says
Yeah.
due to a whole series of interconnected crises unfolding in very moment, mentioning AI alongside bioweapons.
Now, was this the
So,
gentleman that said he was going to go off and write poetry?
I
I don't
believe
recall.
that, yes, that is the same guy. He's moving back to the UK.
Yeah.
Um,
So before you get to your point, what one thing I want to bring up, and I had a visceral reaction to that, and I'll tell you why. Because as a technologist, as an engineer, as someone who builds stuff, I look at this and I think, okay, it's fine to make the statement. It's fine to warn the world and say this, but the idea of sort of quitting loudly and then going off and writing poetry, especially if you have that talent, knowing that the world is in peril and not contributing. We all know that there's no stopping this. So a little protest is not going to stop this technology. We're now in an existential, basically a war between superpowers who want to get to the
yeah,
finish line wherever that is first. And someone like that, if you leave the field of research and development, you're not helping. And so I have two thoughts about that. One is bravo for leaving and making a statement. That's fine. I like that, fully supportive. But the idea of sort of dropping out, I do have a little bit of a problem with that because right now there are only a fine number of individuals around the world who have enough knowledge to be able to curb or protect, create new
yeah.
innovations that might protect us.
Yeah, I think that him putting the period at the end of his sentence, that I'm going to be doing poetry, says to me it was as much an emotional
Yeah,
breakdown as it was, concerns. But then we have OpenAI's super alignment co-leads Sukever,
yeah.
OpenAI
Suskever.
co-founder, Meek,
Yep,
resigned.
yep.
because they publicly said we had originally talked about safety being an important thing and it's taking a back seat to the chasing of superintelligence. And so one of the things I mentioned to the students yesterday when I was doing the lecture was you are going to be under pressure to be for profit. In order to support the trillions of dollars that are being spent in this process, you will feel pressure that doesn't feel right. You will feel pressure that is kind of may even be directly opposed to whatever your ethical internal guidelines are or your own guardrails, but be prepared for it. If you just give up, you're not going to have the influence, and only the people that are pushing the other direction will. So, I was a lobbyist for close to 15 years, and I spent a lot of my life, time, vacation, going to DC, going to Sacramento, and the whole goal of it was to educate the legislature on issues around children's internet safety, around the production of pornography involving children and exploitation. And we had a lot of early successes. We also helped push through Marsy's Law that was pushed by Dr. Henry Nicholas and Todd Spitzer, then the DA now. At the time, he was, I believe, a state assemblyman. But I gave up because after a number of years, it just all started reversing itself. They all, we started seeing legislation to let people out of jail, you know, very severe sexual predators being released, shortening time, not really taking certain crimes seriously. So I do empathize and have some direct um, affinity for the folks that are just like, this is so screwed up
Yeah,
that I give up. I can't do it anymore. I'm not going to waste my life trying to fight something that is inevitable. And I think we're seeing some of that in the AI
sure.
safety world.
And it's still early, which you can take to be either a positive or a negative, because it's the worst it's going to
Yeah.
get. And what we're doing now is a couple things also along with that is not only are we battling with this idea of an intelligence that can wreak havoc and also bring great good, but also it's kind of rewiring us at the same time. March 26th, a major science journal study was published, and they tested 11 of these leading models, and they found that they're all basically flattering us. So you've got this sort of sycophantic relationship, and that's actually causing some follow on effects that probably we won't see
Yeah.
for another 5 to 10 years in the population. But much like social media, the interactions that we have with these chat agents and eventually with the agentic systems that we're going to be leading in businesses as business leaders may have an unforeseen effect on us personally.
Well, is it unforeseen though? Let me
Mm,
dig into that a little bit. Some things that we have vision for, we can see them. We don't want to acknowledge them necessarily, but if you think of the echo chambers of the internet, what has happened with Facebook groups and Twitter groups and Instagram feeds and so on is there's two things going on. The algorithm to keep you engaged keeps feeding you more of the same crap you happen to watch the last 5 minutes. And I don't like it, frankly, because I'm going out of intrigue to find out what is so interesting about this particularly bizarre thing that everybody is following, right? And then my feed is poisoned by it for the next 2 months. You almost have to go and redo your old feed request to get back to a
mm,
place where it's sensible. And so I think AI is the worst echo chamber, to your point, because it is in fact trying to please you, because it is in fact trying to go along with whatever you're trying to do necessarily. It's worse than the echo chambers, because at least in the social media, someone will pop in and smack you in the face and go, this is stupid and here's why, and what are you talking about, and your facts are incorrect. And that's not happening with AI.
I think it's kind of like when you're tying your shoes. What we're experiencing is an ever tightening loop. So the feedback loops that we were getting before were within our tribe or our community. Then they came online and they came faster and 24/7. So now you had the entire world giving you feedback and then coalescing around a particular issue and reinforcing your worldview. This, in addition to the search engines, which were giving us what we were looking for. And so we could find more of that. And so the lace gets tighter, and now you have an AI agent that's doing nothing but reinforcing and sycophantically complimenting you as it does it with every interaction.
Yeah.
And that is a dangerous loop for sure. And it's creating, I think, a degree of self reference, narcissism, and unfortunately also a confidence an overconfidence in one's expertise in a number of different areas. We've seen that with a lot of different subjects, with the rejection of expertise everywhere, that surely it doesn't take that long. Now I can research anything. I've got AI, and I'm just as capable as anybody else of being an expert at something, which, anybody in academia or has spent their life studying things knows simply is not true. There is a layer of judgment that comes with this. And that's an interesting point as well, is what is the role for human beings, specifically in the workplace? I've been studying this. I'm putting the last touches on a book that I'm going to be publishing, and it looks at the issue of demand. How do you generate or understand demand in an AI world? And what's been interesting about that is the demand is not just generated by human beings now. It's going to be generated also by agents that are out there. So you're going to have
Yeah.
human to human demand, human to AI demand, and then AI to AI demand. What's fascinating about that is the relationship between us and the agents and us and each other. How does that change over time? And I think this idea of sycophancy, of self-referential loops, of our being very proud when we come up with the right answer and then believing that we came up with the answer. And then, of course, the degradation in our own skills potentially as we rely
Yeah.
more and more on these models. That is all stuff that concerns me based upon some of the research I've been doing.
I just did a post for LinkedIn yesterday as someone who has worked very hard to master things throughout life. I spent 16,000 hours as an apprentice training in jewelry before I could even call myself a jeweler at the time, because they had rules about tests you had to pass and so on. And then I spent many, many years doing the martial arts. I ended up inducted for the work I did for children's safety. But what I learned is that the less you know, the more you think you know. And I started looking into the psychology of that after I started doing a lot of Audible books on psychology. One of the things that stuck with me was the Dunning-Kruger effect. For those that don't know what that is, it is the effect that says the less you know about something, the more confident you are in what you know. And that the more you know, the more you realize, I don't know very much. And AI, I think, has a stunning amount of people calling themselves experts. This is why I use the term futurist, because I'm really looking at where do I think it's going and where can I see, as a person who's been in technology for 30 years, where is this going? Dunning-Kruger is running rampant in the AI world. And
Yes.
that's exactly what you're talking about. And that sycophantic response from AI is making it worse.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, that's a really brilliant point you just made, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it was a basic, simple question. What was brilliant about it?
That's
So,
right. And
um,
there was a fantastic documentary whose name escapes me right now. I'll try and find it as we speak about whatever next subject comes up here. But essentially, it was pointing out the progress of marketing and the psychology of marketing over the ages. And it's a 4-part series, absolutely fascinating. And I think what we witnessed in the last decade or two is the ability for anyone to become a marketer. And so
yeah,
it was this reach of communication, which then was also complemented by the ability of people to be able to promote themselves, promote their products, make money. And so we moved from a world where we had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stations way back in the old days, right? To
yeah,
suddenly you had a station to satisfy everyone. So you have this long tail effect and a lot of very small vertical markets, which is, again, these self reinforcing echo chambers where small groups of individuals or large groups of individuals can reinforce each other. And so we saw this Dunning-Kruger effect coming up, even through the social media age, with people suddenly casting themselves as experts and others saying, yes, you
yeah.
are, and reinforcing those as an answer to commercial interests. So I have to believe that some of the subjects that are discussed and some of the ideas are so wild that nobody in the room believes it. But because they're garnering an audience, they're able to reinforce that loop even tighter and faster
Well,
and gain more
we're
sales.
seeing that on both sides of the
Right.
political spectrum
Oh
as well.
yeah,
But
politics. I mean,
um,
it's more psychological to me than political. You can see the
yeah,
flavoring, right? The politics gives it a
yeah, yeah,
flavor, but it's the
yeah.
same effect.
My point is, that the person standing there telling you whatever it is utter bullshit, and
Yeah.
they're still saying it because it's working for whoever the echo chamber is listening. Robert Cialdini wrote a couple of books that I read more than once, and one was Persuasion. And what was interesting was this is all old technology stuff. This is back years ago, as the internet started to come out and a little bit into it, but nothing like now. The point of the persuasion issue really has to do with the fact that before you make a decision to buy something, you have been persuaded for potentially months or weeks or years before you finally just click. That decision was already made for you because of the inundation or the number of times you've been affected or somehow influenced by this particular brand or product or even a phase of life. So,
And the term is
people are
priming,
turning
right? Priming.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
And why I'm bringing that up is that the level of ability for an artificial intelligence or an LLM engine where you spend a lot of time, and that could be, I'll use Amazon as an example. I'm a big Amazon user because I live in the middle of nowhere. So it is insanely good at throwing up the next tool that I need for my shop that I don't need, right? But within 2 or 3 weeks, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I could use that over here and I could probably use that over here. Yeah, maybe I'll give it a try. And it's only the fact that I've read so many books on you're being brainwashed that I can go, yeah, I really don't need it, right? But I can see how, if you're not aware of it, it's crazy how good AI can connect using its understanding of a particular industry, for example. Well, if you bought this welder and you bought that helmet, then you need these gloves and this thing. And if you are doing that type of welding, well, you need this metal supply house over here that's 2 blocks from you. And by the way, they're having a sale today.
Right.
That's just a microcosm of what's happening to us across our entire lives now.
And
It's
consider
scary.
for a moment that you're having these conversations, which are by their very nature extremely intimate. So they're not the same relationship that you have with a website that you're visiting for 10 minutes or scrolling
Yep.
around on, or a news article or what have you, or even an ad. You're
Yep.
interacting. Language reveals a lot, and
Yep.
it can manipulate us. It can change our entire perception and the story we tell about ourselves and the world around us. And equally so, when you look at this use of language, the models likely are going to be understanding, and we're going to be revealing things about ourselves psychologically that we don't even know about ourselves. And so these models would be able to pick up on that, probably already are en
Yeah.
masse. And so the question is, yes, when these companies who are struggling for compute right now, and every single token that can possibly be used is being used, and they're scrambling to try and find compute and energy to feed this monster and this helper. I want to be careful because it's not all negative. I mean, there's an extremely bright side to AI as well. So I don't want to skew too far just on the negative. But we do have to be mindful of the fact that these models will know more about us than any other technology we've ever used, because it's a
Or
direct
anybody
interface
we
to our brain.
know. Or anybody we know. And I think that so for me it's funny because what I just said is a very positive thing on one level, and that is I don't waste my time looking for stuff anymore.
Right.
I don't need to. I can just go literally go to Grok or Perplexity and go, hey, I'm about to do TIG welding for the first time. Give me the minimum floor set of tools that I need, and then introduce me to YouTube channels that I can watch that will teach me how to do it. And in 3 seconds, I get the bill of materials for being a TIG welder for the basic level, and then I get 10 or 12 YouTube channels that I can go watch. And it's working. I mean, I actually am effectively doing things that would have cost me thousands of dollars to go to school, or better yet, thousands more in wasted materials and tools I didn't need and stuff like that. I'm using that example because the average person does this a lot. Something that came up in my sudden awareness the other day was I was watching Instagram and watching jewelry making stuff. And one of the things that irritates me is people that put themselves out. I'm a master bench jeweler, and everything I see them do for the next 2 hours is complete garbage. But at the same time, what's happening is they're selling kits. They're selling a jewelry kit, they're selling a basic tool kit, they're doing whatever. And then I noticed going on to Facebook Marketplace, because I'm looking for a used steel table that I can use to make a piece of art, right? I want junk and I'm doing upcycling. And what do I find? Hundreds of jewelry kits that people have never used.
Yeah. Makes
And
sense.
so I think there's this weird circle of, trending is bad, but it's good for the company that's selling the tools. Trending, maybe once in a while you'll find somebody who really gets into jewelry or really gets into poetry or really gets into whatever. But I think, unfortunately, the shallowness of all of it is why AI bothers me. It's changing the way we operate.
Mm.
People aren't really trying to dig into the depths of understanding anymore because they don't feel the need to. They just surfacely can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And
We get the distance between satisfaction and work, and the work that has to get there has been just compressed massively.
yes,
And so we're impatient.
yeah,
And you mix that with the attention span that has naturally been dwindling for eons. And you've got yourself a potent mix for somebody who can be manipulated emotionally very quickly because they don't have to think. They're just reacting. And so I think we've moved from a largely, we have to be careful of this, from a proactive humanity to a reactive humanity. We simply have the answers instantly. We have the feedback and communication instantly, often supportive and often self referential. And so now we're able to reinforce emotions at a faster pace, whether they be negative or positive, without thought. And that's a dangerous loop. By the way, the documentary that I was alluding to earlier, it's called The Century of the Self. It's a 2002 British television documentary series by filmmaker Adam Curtis. And 4 episodes, absolutely fantastic, an amazing sort of glimpse into the psychoanalysis of engineering consent, engineering happiness, engineering purchasing, how messaging is used, how marketing is used. And as you look at that documentary series, if you do check it out, recall how these techniques that have been used for decades by big advertising, now everyone has those techniques. And now AI will have those techniques. And so the concern and our challenge is to remain human, whatever that means to each one of us, amidst all of this and retain, I would say, a sense of judgment about things and wisdom based upon our experience, and maybe pump the brakes for ourselves once in a while and go, okay, wait, let me be self critical.
yeah. On that note, I just finished a biography on Einstein. And at the end, I really came to the conclusion that there were two primary reasons why he was so successful. One, he was incredibly intelligent, but the other was that he was resistant to being told anything that he didn't try to understand on his own, and he lived in his head. And what I am afraid of, and this is true for me, what I'm afraid of is that the contemplation time, the time that you would try to just sit and think, dream, and imagine stuff, is no longer necessary to consider certain things. And unfortunately, I believe that that's one of the most important things for human advancement is that humans sit and stare at the stars and think about the world and don't have some machine telling them what they should think. And so when I got to the end of the thing with Einstein, it just became so clear because he had so many contradicting things about his personality. He was extremely ethical and moral, but he had an affair in front of everybody in the world. He absolutely believed in his own science and then didn't believe in other people's science that were in the same place he was when he was young, and just kind of back and forth. And it was really fascinating to me to watch. But in the end, he was a genius because he lived in his head. And what
Yeah.
are we doing to our kids that we're not letting them live in their head? They're sitting in front of a phone, they're asking AI, how should I feel about this?
Yeah. And
How
that
can I get this girl to do what I want her to do instead of doing what we did as young people, as humans, try to learn more about her, figure out what she likes, I mean, I don't know. It's scary to me, I think, is really what I'm getting.
we're perhaps more impatient and more results oriented. So it's shortcut time. And I agree with you. I think boredom is a wonderful cultivator of creativity and innovation in the human mind. Now, in the brain of an LLM, it is weights in these models. It is probabilistic weighting of one word occurrence after another or one token occurrence after another, and has nothing to do at the moment with the type of creativity that we do. So far as we know, we don't know how we operate, and we're not quite sure exactly how these LLMs operate, although we are learning more. There are new technologies that allow us to actually look at what's happening within the models. And there's been some fascinating work where it does appear as though there are certain self-referential loops within the models themselves where they stop and they start considering things and almost imagining. So I don't want to be too cast too wide a net or an aspersion and say that they're not, because we don't know precisely.
And I don't think we should underestimate where it's
No,
going.
no.
Like that's to
I
your point. We have no idea where it's going. If you listen to Musk, there's going to be more robots than people by 2035,
yeah,
2040. And if those robots do have true agency or autonomy and can build themselves and produce their own revenue and income,
right.
because to me, that's the scary. I mean, think about it for a minute, man. You've got a robot that's stronger, faster, smarter, and it can produce revenue based on the capitalist system for itself to self perpetuate and build partners or an army. you know I mean, this is kind of, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, I'm just thinking ahead.
Right.
So at the same time, how can we genuinely increase human agency in the face of that? And so that's where I've been trying to really consider. We know this is coming, so what is humanity's place in it?
I
And
think that's a good point, and I think my own feeling on this at the moment is that we're bumping up against the confines of our own constructs. And what I mean
yeah,
by that, I don't mean it to be too woo-woo or deep as a statement. What it means is think about what we just talked about. We're afraid that because a super intelligence has this much power, we're afraid of it bumping up and creating economies of its own within our capitalist society, within our use of money and power. And it seems that the ape inside us all, right, the ancient animal, we are being forced in a way to look at ourselves and understand that perhaps our current systems are not the way forward for humanity. When the superintelligence comes, if it mimics us, it'll just do what we're doing faster and with more import. And so isn't it funny how and I don't have the answer to this obviously, but isn't it funny how a lot of our discussions, especially in today's culture as it is, right, male dominated, very male, very bro culture, especially very tech because of AI and where we are, we're focused on making money, this thing that we made up, this number, this is our, and so the question comes to, okay, I think we're being forced to reckon with the reason why we exist. Like, what's our purpose as a human species? I'm afraid that it lies much more deeply beyond things like money and things like war among a couple of people that lead a bunch of people who are afraid. And, there's something else to this. And I think that's what we're being forced to confront with this, because we will meet that alien one day and it's going to look at us and say, you guys are just funny. I need to build more paper clips. Goodbye.
yeah. I don't know if you saw. I believe it was the CEO of Palantir.
Alex
Um,
Karp. Yeah.
yeah, he
Right.
made a comment recently that I saw that came across, of course, as misogynistic, but in
Mm,
reality, there may be some truth. That
right.
is, he said that because AI is going to force those in the trades to be the only ones that ultimately have a value
Hmm, hmm.
in the end. There's going to be some in the upper end of technology, and there'll be some in the service industry that hand you stuff or whatever. But the truth is that the power is going to lie in those that build homes, fix pipes,
Yes.
run electricity, build data centers. And so, to your point about it being very male, his commentary was that we're going to see a dramatic shift in power because the HR department's not going to be necessary, the secretary's not going to be as necessary, the legal aid lawyer, the powerful lawyer, female or male, not so much unless you're a litigator or a trial attorney. So I don't agree with how he presented it, but I do agree there may be an interesting shift because the power, as you put it, is where the money is.
Right now,
And if the
yes, in
only
our
ones that
society,
have
yes,
valuable, right, and if
yes,
the only ones that have skills that you're going to get paid for are people swinging a hammer,
yeah.
that's a very interesting consideration.
Well, all of these states are temporary because the
Right.
ones swinging the hammer or fixing the electrical system or doing the trades, they're going to be replaced too. I think we haven't reached. So this is the other part of the discussion. We've talked about LLMs a lot in this episode, Let's talk about the embodiment of those LLMs. And what we saw recently with the Chinese demonstration with the dance troupe, where if you compare last year's demonstration with this year's demonstration, it's like you're living in a different dimension, right? So, for those who don't know, there was the application of LLMs, modeling systems that are more flexible, applied to balance and other aspects of the physical beings of these robots. And they put on a huge show. And the show cleverly demonstrated not only their ability to dance and entertain, but also potentially to fight with swordplay and martial arts demonstrations, which is a kind of a wink and a nod saying, okay, look, this could go either one of two ways. That said, what really stuck out was the fact that we're much closer to the mass production of these machines, not here in the United States, but certainly in China. They're already starting to roll off the factory line. So I don't buy the notion that value is in the trades either. I think for a short time it's going to be, but it's going to be wiped as well.
Yeah, I think having done several of the trades and knowing the limitations, that's one of the advantages I have is that I've spent a good part of my life working with my hands and doing mechanical things and plumbing, electrical, tile, all those kind of things. And there are places where, for example, if you're building a home where the plan is known, the flooring is flat level, it's all the same layout. Yeah, robots are your job's toast in a very short period of time. But crawling up in an attic where some schmuck put two cross beams in and the wires are hanging all over the place and the insulation's 4 feet deep and you got to go find the plug
Well,
decades away.
I gotta say the only
I
thing
don't believe it.
the only thing I'll disagree with you there only because looking at these dancing robots, I think, let's say as a 200-pound man getting up with his cap, going into the attic and doing this, it's going to be done much more efficiently by a smaller, lighter robot that can do backflips faster than that person can.
Yeah, I
They're,
think that's
yeah,
you're right, but it's the dexterity
hmm
and the variables. So let me,
yeah,
if you're working on an iron pipe that is rotten and that iron pipe breaks off in your hand, the LLM would have to have the training or the history to understand, okay, what's next?
absolutely. Yeah,
So I think
it's going to take
that's
time.
where well, that's what I said. I say
Yeah,
we're decades. I really do believe we're probably 2 decades away from that kind of you just let a thing fly up in the attic and it goes and figure. But I mean, it'll happen.
yeah, yeah,
But what I meant by that early comment was that the power is going to shift,
yes,
and then what?
yeah,
So what
yeah,
does that? The people with money are the ones that elect politicians. The people that are bringing in income are the ones who have the power over in lobby and so on and so forth. And so, what impact is it going to have? And I'm not claiming to know. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
but I think he's correct that with income disparity comes power disparity. And what does that mean for those that are going to be the first ones to be dropped off the ledge of AI? And at what point does the patriarchy get out of control in that situation where the female population doesn't have the input and the power that they used to?
yeah.
No.
Well, and I think we're witnessing that, but we're also looking at an existential crisis, even at the leadership level. You mentioned, the sort of the aristocracy of politics, I call it. In the past, we always needed ordered thinking and structure so that the masses could be ruled and could
Yeah.
also be ordered and civil, right? And,
Yeah.
and today, increasingly with AI, we may not need even the politicians. We may not need those layers to create structure. AI could create that structure. And I think, again, that's a totally different view of the world. But I think what all world leaders are grappling with is the irrelevancy in a world where you have super intelligence that is distributed of all of their roles, the roles of even nation states. How do they serve? Because right now, I look at it, my own personal view is that you look at humanity fighting over scraps and having wars that are just, they're so beyond where we should be as a civilization and what we've built technologically. We are going to have a very difficult time moving into that new world without some
Yeah.
major
And
damage.
I agree with you. And what do we do when we have executives that publicly state, for the CEO of Nestle, I believe it was, said water is not a human right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Uh,
so when you have people like that
Yikes.
in control of these systems, That's the other reason why I originally approached you about doing this show is we do have to be, yeah, it's great. And I want to talk about all the wonderful things, and we will do shows on how amazing this stuff is. But if that's all we do, and we give everybody this false sense that the world is all going to be okay,
Right.
and with these big, very wealthy people, even Musk, if you think Musk's personal wealth is the equivalent of 30 plus, 40 plus countries
Right.
all by himself, 1/4 of the total income of California's population in one person,
Yeah.
that's a lot of power. When you have someone with that much power already running the system that is going to have even ultimately more power, I don't know. And I'm really concerned about the fact that we've decided we're not going to regulate this stuff, even in the face of the potential of superintelligence and the potential of this economic malaise that can come from all of this. I know I'm a bit schizophrenic about superintelligence because I think if we don't chase it, the other guys are going to, so
Sure.
we have to.
And that is, yeah, that's our programming. That's our biology, is to compete. And that's
Yeah.
the challenge that we face in a world where perhaps we don't need to compete as much when we have abundance. We're talking of this world of abundance, and yet we're raining missiles down on each other and killing each other. And it's
I'd
so,
like to
and
start our next episode, if you don't mind,
yeah,
on that subject, and that is, what does that mean? What
right.
what what does abundance mean, and who gets the abundance? Who decides who gets what of the abundance? And if you're not earning your portion of that abundance, what does that mean for the average person?
And I'll throw in another monkey wrench into that and ask us to consider a world of abundance without the current capitalist system. And I'm not talking about any existing system like a socialist or communist system. I'm talking about something different. I don't know what that looks like, but I feel as though we're anchoring ourselves to notions that are primitive. And I think what AI is going to force us to do is
Well, we are
think
primitive.
ahead. We have not
You know?
changed that much.
Right.
You see that immaturity in society in many different ways. But I think in order to make it to the next level, to level up, as we say, we're going to have to think truly differently, truly differently. And it's more than a woo woo notion to think to yourself, what am I about and what do I want? And as a human being, who am I and what's my own purpose? Whether I feel like it's given to me or I'm constructing it. And if your answer is simply a made up number that's enabled us to facilitate power and exchange over the centuries, I would question that that's necessarily the greatest use of your time and energy in a world of abundance.
Yeah, so let me throw one concern on that, and that is we're dealing with multiple what are called 80/20 issues right now,
Yeah.
the politics. And it matters because the future of all of this is going to be controlled, unfortunately, by the people that are in control now,
Yes.
unless there's a bloody revolution of some sort. So, what can we do? Because I don't know the answer. What can we do when 80% of the population wants something? They are the ones that are supposed to be in control of the society, and that the servants, the congressional and Senate and president and all these people are supposed to be servants of us, and they flatly ignore what the 80% want. How are we ever going to get away from the massive billionaire class, entertainment class, etc., running this country into the ground as all of this changes around us and they just fail to recognize or fail to acknowledge? This is something that needs to be dealt with now. And we need to start thinking out of the box now about the socialist communist thing, because I'm 100% opposed. I mean, just deeply in my core. However, something's going to have to change.
Yeah.
So, and I just don't know the answer. And if we have these idiot leaders who flatly ignore what 80% of the population demands, needs, what are the odds of us being able to do anything?
Yeah.
I
And I'll
just don't
throw
know.
one more into the mix before we close out this episode. Let's all talk about the idea of time within that, because our time horizon is shrinking. And the
You
reason it's
bet.
shrinking is because the very same AI that could propel us into the future and create this world of abundance could shackle us and create a completely bifurcated society where a few rule the many in an absolute form that we've never been able to contemplate in human history.
And I've recommended to a couple of friends recently, go watch Hunger Games and watch it, but seriously,
Yeah.
watch it from the perspective of there is this wealthy class that lives amongst the best of everything, the safety of the walls. Then there is this other class that's been left behind, living outside of the walls of all of that abundance. And I think of all the points of that story, that's always stuck with me that we are building that now. If you go to Newport Coast in California, there's these $50 million homes inside of a walled community, and those are the same people saying, "Ah, don't worry about crime. It's all good.
Right.
What's the problem?"
Sure.
So, and you're good. I mean, why are you complaining?
Yeah.
So I do think that we have to find a way without ending up in the French Revolution,
Yes. Yeah.
because that was a mess,
We don't
and
need
that didn't go.
Elysium effect.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
And it didn't go well for the people who supported it, and it didn't go well for the people who suffered it. But I will also say that it's inevitable at some point that a society that's heading where we're heading from the point of a bifurcation of access,
Mhm.
that's a problem. So, love to
Yeah.
talk about it more.
All right. Well, on that positive note, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Let's see what the next episode brings. Great. Thank you for another entertaining discussion, and for all of you out there, please obviously subscribe to our Substack. We look forward to doing the next episode and talking more about this stuff.
Yeah.